Welcome to Cosmic Soul Sisters. We're a portal to all things magical, mystical, and spiritual, helping to raise the consciousness of humanity one conversation at a time. And I'm your Cosmic Soul Sister, Shara.
I'm your Cosmic Soul Sister Leah.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about emotional healing and spiritual development. And we are beyond excited to introduce our guest, Jennifer Febel. Is it Fable or Fable? Febel.
It's Fable. You actually, yeah, no one ever gets that right, so I'm impressed.
And she is from Live Life Unbroken. And Jennifer is a mentor, a coach, an author, and a speaker who offers alternative care for anyone who might be suffering from overwhelm or unexplained sadness and past trauma. Anyone who hasn't been able to find healing, the healing that they need through traditional mental health services. So, hi, Jen. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we were wondering if you could first perhaps just share with our listeners a bit about your journey and some of the main philosophies that you pull into your healing services.
Absolutely. So, my journey, I mean, it's been lifelong, but officially started when I was 19, because that's when I received my official diagnosis. And at the time, it was seven different mental health diagnoses, including anorexia, bulimia, major depression, generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, suicidal ideation, and self harm, which means that there are scars on my body that I put there. Um, in other words, broken. And every specialist I saw, every doctor, all agreed that I was broken. And I believed them because when some really smart people with really impressive degrees on the wall and like a lot of letters after their name, when they tell you that you're broken, it's only a matter of time before you believe them. And that became my story. That became the thing that I told myself about myself to myself. And it became what I lived, and I stayed in that place for over 13 years. And I thought that that was kind of the best it was going to get. You know, I have a degree in psychology. I spent 13 years in and out of therapy, in and out of crisis teams, in and out of the hospital. And I believe at the time that I entered recovery, I had a statistical chance of ever recovering of about 12%. So I kind of got used to this place. And then through the universe and the little breadcrumbs that it lays out to you, I accidentally, quote unquote, found myself finding tools that I didn't believe in and I didn't think would work. And I was desperate, and it was recommended by someone who I trusted. And I said, fine, I'll give it a go. And I was shocked when, within about 3 months, not only was all my anxiety and I had developed a severe phobia of insects and bugs and literally wouldn't leave the house. And I don't know about where you live, but Ontario in Canada, where I live, is really buggy, especially in the summertime. So I wouldn't leave the house. And it was so bad that even going to like the hardware store where they have those containers of bug spray that have like a picture of a wasp on it, I couldn't look at it. I have to like walk down the aisle like that. So it got pretty bad, and I was surprised when not only did the phobia go away, but all the thoughts and all the fears that kind of drove the eating disorder started to fall apart. I'm like, well, how does this work? How did that happen? And so I ended up pursuing, just out of interest because I'm nosy and I'm a nerd and I need to understand things. And so I took the trainings to understand what was going on. And I just celebrated on December 18th my 10-year recovery anniversary, as I call it. So 10 years fully recovered. And that's not something that you're supposed to be allowed to say in the eating disorder world. We're told that recovered is not possible, that long term recovery is the best we can hope for. And it's not true. It's not true. And so I've been medication free for a decade. I've been fully recovered from a decade. And now I am really honored to be able to help others walk the path of healing and find tools that get them to where they want to go, as opposed to the traditional system's great because it stops you from driving off the cliff of life. And that's really important when your car is headed towards the cliff. But it kind of stops there, and then you end up in this place where your whole life is just looking at this cliff that you at one point wanted to drive over. And so I help people do a 3 point turn because there's a whole world behind you that's not that cliff. And so I do this through my one on one work, I do this through my online courses, through healing circles. And it's been really cool. And every person I work with, I always say it's such a selfish thing that I do because I get just as much out of it as they do. Because when I guide healing, I heal as well. And so I'm very honored that people trust me with that part of their journey. And it's really nice to see people find that healing.
Amazing. That's amazing. What were the tools? What was the tool that your friend suggested that you use?
The main one was actually hypnosis, because when it comes to phobias, there's really only two methods of healing. There's desensitization therapy, which means that at some point someone was going to put me in a room with a bug, and I'm like, I'm not paying for that. Who would sign up for that? That's ridiculous. Or hypnosis, which I honestly thought was bunk. I thought it was ridiculous, but I was not going to pay to be put in a room with a bug, and I couldn't leave my house. And my chiropractor is the one who recommended it, and I trusted her. And she knew this person because I'm like, I'm not going to let some weird quack scramble my brain. Like, I didn't understand any of what hypnosis was. I was not into spirituality outwardly. It always was kind of there, but I didn't know that I had permission to tap into it and that it could be practically used in life. So hypnosis was the main one, and that I didn't realize hypnosis was energy work. But it is. It's very definitely is. So yeah, that was the main tool, and there's other ones that kind of play into that.
We always ask our people that come on our podcast, our guests, what their portal was, or in other words, what was the thing that kind of revealed to them that the universe is more than we were taught. Most of us growing up. What
Right.
would you say? What would you say yours was?
Mine would have to be when my dad passed away, actually. He got sick. He passed away 11 years ago. Because for about a year after he passed, I was just lost. But I always say one of the best gifts he gave me was when he left. Because we had this thing in our family where whenever you got to your destination, you had to call and say you got there safely. And it was so much so that if I was a kid and I went to my neighbor's house and I didn't call, my mom was like, okay, you have to come home. And so my dad passed away, and I remember thinking, like, I don't know where he is, what's going on now. I just felt really lost. And I had this dream. And in the dream, I became fully lucid, so I knew I was dreaming. And I went into a phone booth and the phone rang, and I heard my dad say, I just wanted to let you know I'm here. And I woke up not knowing what the hell just happened. And so I was always very curious about that stuff, but I was raised very science minded, like I excelled in chemistry, biology, physics, so very left brain stuff, but was always curious about that stuff. And so when this happened, I was like, well, now what? So I started reading books and learning more, and that just sort of opened up everything. So I think that I think my dad opened it for me.
Hmm.
Gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely not easy to say goodbye, but the path of grief, of healing grief, is such a transformative and powerful process. If we let it, it can change us in amazing ways, but we often don't let it because it feels feely. It's not a fun feeling, but yeah, it was definitely a very powerful time, and slowly but surely I opened up to these gifts and realized that a lot of them had been there all the time, and I just kind of didn't know until I knew. So yeah.
Do you see that with some of your clients too? That maybe they come to you in the beginning and they aren't as open to those ideas, but then they start to discover and unlock their own superpowers.
Oh, for sure. This is something that it's really interesting. When I work with someone, I'm working with them for emotional healing. I'm working with them for overwhelm, for sadness, for anxiety, for trauma. And what we're basically doing is we're connecting the head and the heart. Because oftentimes, and I used to do this to my therapist, I was a terrible patient because they'd tell me stuff. I'm like, yeah, I have the same degree. I know. But how do I make myself feel it? Like, I understand what you're saying, but my heart doesn't believe you. And so when I work with people, I always say we're bridging the gap between the head and the heart and connecting them. And a byproduct of that process is the connecting in with some of our innate gifts. We become more intuitive. And so a lot of the people I've worked with find that once they connect to that part, suddenly they become more aware of things. And that's kind of was the basis for my Bridging the Gap course, right? That the emotional realm, that our emotions are the bridge that allow us to take things from the energy world around us and bring them and manifest them into physical. Our emotions are the one thing we're not really taught what to do with or how to use them. We're taught that they get in the way of things, but actually they are the catalyst for all magic in our life.
I was lucky enough that I got to take that course. And it spoke to me because I could see that in myself. Oftentimes I would, definitely in the past, have used things like crystals or yoga or meditation as kind of like band-aids. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was so addicted to yoga, like I would almost have to do it twice a day because I was using it to cover up all the junk inside me that I hadn't faced. You
Right.
know, I had tried to heal. So that course really tied all that together. You know, you can't necessarily just jump to trying to do spiritual practices and forget about everything, that's happening in your human too.
Right. And, we like that. We love, the world of love and light, it's amazing up there, right? Feeling our feelings sucks a lot of the time. So anything we can do to not feel our feelings, we will do it. And we are three-dimensional beings. We have this, I call my meat skeleton. We have this meat skeleton that we walk around in that we are connected to, and we chose it for a reason. And our emotions are that bridge that help us understand how we fit into this whole system. And yet, we turn off our communication system and then wonder why we feel like we're flying blind. And because we are, we literally are.
Do you have any advice for someone, for any of our listeners who might be stuck in one emotion? Do you have any tips for, I guess, how to broaden or expand different emotions?
Absolutely. So in the sphere of psychology that I practice within, which is a branch known as Gestalt psychology, which Gestalt is just fancy for organizational system, right? So our brains are big organizing machines. So if I said to you, name 10 things that are blue, you can do that because it's somehow tagged as blue. Or name 10 things that make you angry, you can do that. So in Gestalt psychology, the emotions are actually arranged in a hierarchy. And it goes like this. It's anger at the top, then sadness, then fear, then hurt, then guilt. So anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt. And so what often happens is something happens in our life and we get angry. And this is the emotion that our unconscious mind uses to let us know when there's something going on with our boundaries. And so since we're interacting with other human beings, we get angry a lot. Only we're taught that anger's not nice. We shouldn't feel anger. We rationalize our anger. We justify it. We do whatever we can to not feel it. And what happens is that gestalt gets kind of overloaded and collapses down into sadness. And that's what we call depression. So depression is 100% of the time repressed anger. Now, if we're taught not to show our sadness either, because, no one likes a Debbie Downer and just smile and just put on a happy face, then we'll ignore our sadness as well and it collapses down into fear. And that's what we call anxiety. So I always like to say, you're not anxious, you're pissed off. You show me someone who struggles with overwhelm, sadness, and anxiety, I will show you someone who likely is out of tune with their emotions and has terrible boundaries and still thinks that boundaries means saying no or sharing how you feel, which it's not. And so oftentimes when someone's experiencing one emotion over and over again, it's because these other emotions are locked down. So they're experiencing, let's say, anxiety. Or if you're really lucky, all of your gestalts are completely stuck together and the only emotion you really feel is guilt or shame. Right? Everything is just why me, why me? So when people are locked in that place, the best thing they can do is to actually open up space by accessing it through their anger. And so I teach something, it's called the anger purge ritual. It's something that is on my website if anyone wanted to get the instructions. There's free downloadable worksheets. It's livelifeunbroken.com/anger. And it's a 5-minute process. It's a form of shadow work, so people will resist it. But if they are keen to heal, if you do this every day for 30 days, I kid you not, I've seen miracles show up in people's life. And it's literally just you set a timer for 2 minutes, and you have to set a timer because time moves very differently when you're feeling emotion. So for 2 minutes, you do something physical like punch the snot out of a pillow or strangle a washcloth or smack, or I've had people scribble, or I love to scream at trees. It's hard to find when I run retreats, or I did before COVID and will again. And we scream at trees and always ask permission, always give thanks. But the trees are so wonderful, and that's a great one to do. But if you live in a subdivision, don't do it. They'll call the cops. But you do something physical to get the emotion out. You can scream into a pillow if you need to. And then once you've done that 2 minutes of something physical, then you reset the timer for 3 minutes. And then you put your pen on a piece of paper, and your goal is to just keep it moving. It's called a stream of consciousness writing, and whatever comes up. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. Sometimes I just write about what I want for lunch. It can be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. What's coming up? I don't know. And you just whatever. And the goal is to unload all that hamster wheel garbage that spins around in our head and just unload it somewhere. Because what we either do is we hold on to it and we fight with it, or we offload it onto people in our lives. And then they run from us. Or they give us terrible advice and tick us off. And so our emotions are our unconscious mind talking to us. It's our own biofeedback mechanism. And so it is better for our relationships if we can channel our emotions into our journal, find the wisdom that's hiding underneath, because there's always a gift in the pain, and then show up in our relationships from this place. So I would say if anyone's stuck in a specific emotion, anger, because it's the top of the gestalts, is always a really easy way to access it. And if someone finds that they're being triggered by their anger or they resist it terribly, that means there's a lot of stuff hiding in the shadow self, and then it might be time to call someone else in for some help. But it's a great practice, and it's a dynamic meditation versus, sit there, contemplate your navel. Not many of us are good at that, right? But all of us really need the time to just kick something, especially with times the way they are, So I'd say that's probably the best thing for people to do.
Great. I can't wait to try that.
Yeah. Oh, it's fun. I run a group on Facebook, and we do challenges where we'll do a 30-day anger work challenge. We actually just finished 60 days because we did 30 days, and then we're like, what else is there to do? No one's going anywhere. So we did 60 days, and I'm always astounded at resources that show up in my path, people who reach out and connect, things that come up for healing. It's one of those things that it's such a simple process that it's really easy to judge its power based on its simplicity. And it's a cumulative thing. So if you do anger work here and there once in a while, it'll feel good. But if you do it every day for 30 days, sometimes it can take 21 full days for someone to even feel their anger. If they're really good at being nice, they might not even feel angry for 21 days. They might feel numb. They might just feel like, I don't know what the point of this is. This is dumb. I don't know why this lady told me to do this. Like, that's totally normal. But after 30 days, amazing things happen. It's very, very cool. So please let me know when you do it. Keep me posted. It's fun.
I definitely will. So one of the things that Leah was telling me about in the Bridging the Spiritual Gap course that she did with you was this concept that she found fascinating. The concept of motivation and boundaries and the importance of respecting the pain of others that could be potentially there for the higher good. Is there any chance you could expand upon this for our listeners? Does that describe what you're talking about, Leah?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to motivation, we're either motivated towards what we want or away from what we don't want. And we like to think that if you put a big enough carrot on a long enough stick that we will go for it. But the fact is most of us are motivated by our pain. So the difference between it is, so moving towards our goal. So let's say it's the difference between I work so that I can retire in Arizona and spend all day on the golf course and all night in crystal shops. So I'm moving towards that goal, right? Wouldn't that be amazing? With curling in between, because Canadians, you got to curl, right? Or I work because I don't want to end up broke and living on the streets, which is an away from strategy, right? I'm moving away from the pain of debt versus towards the goal of retirement. Most of us, we like to think that we're all towards and that we just need a better goal. But the reality is a lot of us have pain in our motivation strategy, which means that pain is important. And when it comes to anyone who's walking the healing path, and this is particularly any of your listeners who are Reiki people, I'm looking at you. Reiki people are the most notorious for this. We learn how to give healing and we see someone in pain and our heart hurts for them and we want to help them. And so we do something to take away their pain, whether we do energy healing, whether we give unsolicited advice, whether we rescue or enable, we do something to alleviate this person's pain, thinking that's what they need. But if their pain point, let's say their pain point is here, and until they hit this point, they won't be motivated to get better. And if every time I help them out and send them healing and offer advice, I catch them here, and then I keep them here, they never hit that part, that pain that motivates them to heal. And so while I alleviate their pain, pain is important. They might need it. They might need to hit rock bottom and bounce a couple times in order to find that motivation to heal. I know I certainly had to, right? I had to hit a very, very deep, I call it the rock bottomiest of bottoms in order to bounce and find my path. And so while it's a really nice thing to do, to offer this healing, it's not necessarily compassionate. Compassion is about recognizing that pain's important, holding space for someone to transform, and offering to be there for them if they need you, but not automatically rescuing and not automatically giving Reiki, right? If you are an energy healer and you must do something, please send it to their higher self or get permission. Because if I ask someone permission to give them advice or to send healing, and they say yes, then if they get away from their pain point, it's on their karma. They use their free will to accept help. But if I don't ask them, and I just pull them away from their pain point because I'm trying to be nice, now that's on my karma. I didn't even give them a choice. And so if you want to help someone, just ask, is it okay if I offer some input? And if they say no, respect that. Hold space compassionately for their pain, and hold space that their pain will hit the level they need it to get the transformation that they want in their life.
And maybe what their soul contracts have, or they, thinking about it from the point of view of we maybe signed up for certain lessons in our lives. Sometimes I worry that I'm stepping on their toes by trying to alleviate those lessons. Like I think about that with my kids a lot. I have older kids. And it's a tough boundary because you don't want to see your kids in pain. You don't want to see your kids going through all these struggles. But at the same time, I want to respect that their struggles are probably their greatest learning potentials.
Absolutely. Let's say I have a soul contract that my soul decided to come here to learn the divine lesson of forgiveness. Well, by very definition, that means I must attract into my life someone to forgive. And the divine lesson of forgiveness is not, oh, you stepped on my foot, I forgive you. Like it's got to be a big betrayal, and likely more than once before I find the path of forgiveness. Right? And so in order to learn the divine message of forgiveness, I must have multiple people betray me. And so that pain is part of my sacred soul contracts and of my learning. So yeah, we want to make sure we hold space and we compassionately guide versus fix, problem solve, and protect. And yeah, yeah, I know, right? Yeah, and it's hard. It's a hard balance. It's a hard balance. Nothing, especially if you're an empath. Oh my gosh. If you're an empath and you feel the pain in your body, it's so uncomfortable. And that's the thing. We alleviate the other person's pain, not for their pain necessarily, but for our own discomfort. And that's where it gets kind of icky, karma-wise.
100%. On a similar topic, this is just coming into my world right now. I have a friend whose husband or her son, he's like mid-20s, found out that he's very ill. It's kind of came on quickly. He has like a liver thing, and he actually needs to get on the list for a new liver. And they literally just found out this week. How would you recommend that I help her through her grief?
Has she asked for help?
In certain ways, like not on an emotional level, but like on a business level, like she asked if he could come in, and we actually own a health club. So she said, can he come in and work out at the gym? Can he come and swim in the pool? And I was like, absolutely. Like, we're not going to charge you. Please bring him in, that type of stuff.
Right.
But beyond that, like the emotional side, she hasn't.
Right. So then I would say, so grief is one of those things that you cannot take away from someone. You can walk beside them as they walk the path, and you can say, hey, I'm here. Kind of like when a kid's learning to ride a bike and you take off the training wheels and they're now riding it, and your hand's on the seat, but they're mostly riding the bike, and then you let go, but you're still kind of jogging beside them. And if they wobble, you kind of stabilize them, but you can't ride the bike for them. That's kind of the path of grief. We can walk beside them. We can put our hand on the seat when they wobble. We can ask them, hey, do you want me to keep running beside you for a little bit, or do you want me to stop? So we need to kind of let them be the guide and just hold space. And if we see them struggling, say, hey, I notice you struggling. I'm here. What can I do? Right? So things like that. And knowing that, so the path of grief, by very definition, has a lot of anger in it. It's even like grief is 5 stages. Anger is one whole stage of grief. And it's the stage we all like to skip. So letting her, giving her permission, holding space for her to be ripping mad at the universe, at herself, at whoever, and letting her know that it's okay. And, if she's open to it, saying, hey, I know something that helps with anger, and then, introducing her to anger work, but grief is a path that must be walked without interference. Otherwise, we get stuck in it. So just holding that space. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. A friend of mine just lost her sister, and they were very, very close. And she said, she was my sounding board. She was my rock. She was my everything. So I didn't just lose a sister. I, in some ways, lost part of my identity. And so walking the path of grief for her is about finding herself and coming back to herself, which is a beautiful process. And we wouldn't want to interrupt that. While, yeah, it's a painful thing, what a gift her sister gave her in leaving, because it triggered in her a necessity to come back to and find herself.
Is that something you would share with her, or do you just know inside your heart? Like,
So she did reach out for my input, so I did share. And I let her know that, the tools I used cannot erase current emotions because you have to listen to them, you have to walk the path. And I did let her know that if she needs any support, current grief will bring up unresolved past grief. And so I can help with that. I can help support. I can help give. I can help create the space for her to walk that path within and help guide her so that she keeps moving forward. Because grief is one of those paths where it's really easy to just say, you know what, I don't want to, and just sit still and wait for it to go away. So she did give some permission, so I offered input, and now I said, this is what I can help you with. And she's now gets to decide and let me know what a level of support she wants, and then whatever she needs, I'm there for her. But she has to be the guide. She has to be the guide. Yeah. It's a tough one. Grief is a tough one. Grief is something that I think on a global scale is what we're all experiencing right now, right? In Chinese medicine, grief lives in the lungs, right? It's associated with air, and so it's very interesting that on a global scale we have this virus that is causing stuff in the lungs. And I personally believe that there's a lot of letting go and processing of global grief right now. And I think that that is what we need. Grief is, the rising of the phoenix. Grief is the emotion that burns us to the ground so that we can rise from the ashes. But I don't know how familiar you or your listeners are with tarot deck.
a little bit.
A little bit. So the Tower card in tarot is my favorite card. The first time you get it, you're like, oh no, and by the 10th time, you're like, all right, let's do this. Right? But what's interesting in the Tower card, if you look, there's a little crown on the very top of the tower. And the only way to get the crown is to let it fall. And I think that's the same philosophy with grief. We're so busy trying to hold the tower up and stop it from falling, but the purpose of grief is to literally burn it to the ground, let it fall, so that you can rise from the ashes, so you can get the crown and move forward. If you want I think the star is the next card in the deck, if I'm remembering correctly. If you want the star, which gets you to the world, and the moon, the sun, you have to let the tower fall, and that's kind of grief in a nutshell.
I could see our world needing, so many people are like, I can't wait for COVID to be over because then everything will be fine. But I feel like we're going to end up having to heal so much collectively after it's quote unquote over.
Yeah, there's no going back. This is the world evolving. This is, I think, we're reevaluating our what's important to us, connections, realizing. So one of the reasons I started my weekly healing circles, and this is something, it's every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time. It's a free circle on Zoom, and we talk about stuff. We do meditation, and I started that because we exist on four realms, and this is something I talk about in the online course a lot. So we have the physical realm, we have our mental, emotional, and energetic or spiritual. And while, yeah, the physical world might have some restrictions on us depending on where we live in the world, mentally, emotionally, energetically, we can still connect. We can still connect on all those other realms. And distance doesn't have to mean disconnection. And I think that as a society, we are being given the opportunity to learn how to connect. And it's kind of united the world. We all have one common enemy. For the first time in human history, the entire globe is somewhat working together for a common enemy, and that's unprecedented. And so I think that what will evolve out of this will be amazing. But like all grief blocks, we have to let the tower fall in order to get the star and the sun and the moon. Oh, that's my cat outside my door. I apologize to your listeners. He is now howling and moaning. He'll eventually give up. That is Buddha. He's probably dragging around some sort of an intimate piece of clothing at this moment. If he gets really annoying, I can go like say hush, but he usually gives up. So yeah, he's right outside the door now.
I love it. Funny.
One thing, Jen, that I really wanted to touch on because I enjoyed in your course was the use of sacred geometry and the tree of life as well. I wondered if you could expand a little bit to our listeners about how you use that in rituals and in your healing practices.
Ooh, big topic. How do you sum up the tree of the Kabbalistic tree of life in like a short little thing? I know, right? So I use it. So the tree of life, or the Kabbalistic tree of life, which is different from the yogic kind of tree of life. The Kabbalistic tree of life is meant to be a map of our path to divinity. It is meant to be a map that can be mapped onto the human body. It is meant to be a map of all the different dimensions and realms. And so it can be used with everything from how to evolve from Malkuth, which is the physical world, all the way up to Kether, which is the energetic. I personally like to use, there's a technique, it's called the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And it starts with something called the Kabbalistic Cross, and this is exactly what I teach in the course. And it's about pulling divine light through your center meridian, which if you're familiar with the chakra systems will activate the chakras. And then about putting yourself basically at the center point of universal energy. So you basically light yourself up on the energetic realm as a beacon of light, and then you bring in sacred geometry protection to then set a boundary around that energy, so for safety and to hold the energy in. And so I like to use the Kabbalistic Cross, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which all worked with the tree of life, as well as the middle pillar ritual. And these are, they're rituals, but they're also kind of like a meditation practice. And if you're like me and you suck at traditional meditation, just sitting there and, like I said, contemplating your navel or focusing on your breath, I will get bored so fast. Like I just can't handle it. But using the tree of life gives me something to hold on to that is tangible. It gives my mind something to work with so that I can start to work with energy. and it allows me to enter into a very deep meditative state without having to go through the growing pains of constantly, the whole point of meditation is to find the space between thoughts and to quiet the monkey mind. Well, rather than quieting the monkey mind, let's give it something to do. Let's give it a sacred geometry shape to focus on that activates that inner map that we already have because it's encoded in our DNA. And so that the parts of the mind are working together for meditation as opposed to traditional meditation where you're fighting your own head. So I like to use the Kabbalistic Tree of Life for meditation purposes, for protection. Anytime I do any kind of workshop, I always set up the space and clear it. It's, we all like to smudge our space and cleanse it with incense and sage and everything, which is great, but how do we then get our mind into the same kind of cleansed space? And so for me, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life which is a lifelong study, and I am only at the very, very, very beginnings of walking the path, and even that, there's so much power in it. Wow. So I like to use it for meditation and for self-empowerment and healing.
I'm working on it, but it's hard in the beginning because I feel like I just have to read, like I'm sitting there trying to read. I know eventually that it will become second nature though, correct?
It does. And in the beginning, I wrote all the words because all the words are said in the Hebrew language because it's a three-dimensional language, because Hebrew, each letter is also a number and a symbol. Like there's so many layers of symbology to the language versus English, which is a very flat two-dimensional language. Lots of misunderstandings can happen in English, but it's very specific in Hebrew. And so I actually took a recipe card and I wrote the words down phonetically on the recipe card, and then I would hold it and be like, Ata. Right? Like I would just read it that way and do that for a while. And eventually, yeah, it does become second nature, but it takes some time. It takes some time and it's okay. So having taken the course, you know that in order to take energy from the energy world down into our physical reality, it has to move through our mental self, our thinking self, and it has to then move through our emotional. So the first step when you're starting something new is to just go through the motions and think your way through it. You have to go through that stage. That's okay. It doesn't lessen it. It's a necessary part. We like to skip that part. That's the part where we feel the most dumb. We hate it the most. Right? But we have to. That's building that bridge. And then when we think about it and do it from that place enough, we then start to get some feels that go along with it. And that's when it starts to become more second nature. And then the more we do it, then we'll start to see physical changes in our reality. So know that if you're still in the thinking place, you're building your bridge. And that's a really cool thing. It's not a very sexy place to be on the journey, but it's an important step.
Good, I'll keep at
it. Yeah, absolutely. And we actually just, like I said, we did the 30 days of anger work, and then we did another 30 days of anger work, and we added in the LBRP, or the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. So for 30 days in a row. And in the beginning, everyone's like, I don't know what this means. And by the end, it becomes natural. So like anything else, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then once you're not thinking about the words anymore, then you can get into playing with it. Oh, and then it becomes really visceral. It's a really visceral process.
And when you can feel the energy moving through your body too. Right?
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah. My arms buzz like crazy when I do it. And the middle pillar ritual is the only thing that I do that gets me, it's such a hard thing to describe the feeling of. It's almost like I'm suspended between the worlds. That's the feeling I get of just pure suspension and massive downloads that come through in that space. Right? Because we all want these downloads from the universe, but we don't sit still long enough to get them, or get ourselves into a place where we can hear them. And so the middle pillar ritual, the LBRP, the Tree of Life, all these are ways to catch yourself into a receptive mode so that you can actually pay attention to what the universe is literally screaming at us all the time.
Do you think we have guides? Spirit guides?
For sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think we have a whole team. I think that some people we know, some people we don't. I always joke, so like I said, I run these retreats, or will, and I used to co-run them with a lady, and every time I'd come up with something, she's like, I need to go ask my guides. I'm like, yeah, you go talk to your dead people, then let me know what they say. So I call my guides my dead people team. I'm going to talk to my dead people, see what happens, and then I'll come back. So yeah, I absolutely believe that we are guided.
Yeah. I'm curious what's your perspective on the ascension process and the Great Awakening?
I personally think that it's interesting. From the philosophy side of things, I sometimes wonder if, there's that idea that some other alien race came here first and they guide us. And whenever we talk about the ascension process, we always get to this place of where it's pure telepathy, where we don't have to use words, where, we are able to connect and everything is one. And I sometimes wonder if this is actually, we are evolving to what we say comes to visit us. But there's always this next step on the ladder, so they're evolving at the same time. So I think the ascension process, as on a global scale, is about all of humanity recognizing and moving into a place of interdependence. We started our tribal journey as kind of like a codependence place where you were reliant on each other, and then we went through this massive awakening where it became very much independent. It's about me, 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 me. And we can see that very much so happening right now. But with the world having to work together, we're now moving into this interdependence. Yeah, I know I can do it on my own, but we can go farther together. And so I think that the ascension process is about us realizing how much we need each other and being okay with it, because we kind of evolved to this place of, I don't need anyone. I'm the empowered woman. I don't need anybody. And then we're like, why am I always burned out? And why is everything my responsibility? I'm like, well, hello. So I think the ascension process requires interdependence. And when we are in that state, we are part of a symbiotic relationship and system that supports one another. And I think that is what fuels it. So I have these like two different thoughts on like this really wooey kind of like aliens came and planted us here. And I'm like, that could happen. But on the more practical side, I think that it's just about us recognizing that we are pack animals and that we need each other, whether or not we like to admit it or not, and that we can work together to heal ourselves. And in healing, when we work in that space, when I heal, the other people have no choice but to heal. And so when they heal, the other people have no choice but to heal. And so heal the world through healing of self, I think, is the ultimate goal of the ascension process.
Chain reaction.
Yeah, and and it's about healing self. We have to heal ourselves so that other people are inspired by our healing, versus what we like to do is we stay all like unempowered and sucky, but tell everyone else what they should be doing. And then they get mad at us and we're no one, right? You have to start with self. People don't do what you tell them to do. They do what you show them to do. You have to inspire them, right? So walk the path of healing. At the end of the day, the worst case scenario is no one else gets healed, but you get healed.
Yeah.
And I promise you that when you get healed, people will notice, and it will give them hope that healing is possible for them as well. And if more people walk the path of healing and inspire hope in others, the human race has no choice but to ascend to something better.
That's well said. I think you said something like, fill your shine so bright that you leak out on everyone else, basically, or fill your cup so much that people are asking, whoa, what are you doing?
Yep. I shine my light so bright, I ignite the light in others. This is actually the candle meditation that we start every healing circle with. So if anyone chooses to come to Healing Circle, you always have to candle, and we always start with this. Every retreat I run, every event I run. Now, in the physical world, when we do it, it's really nice because what happens is we're all sitting in a circle, and I have my candle, and I light my candle, and I say, I shine my light so bright, I ignite the light in others, and then I offer my candle to the person next to me who lights their candle. And they say the same thing until one by one, the entire circle becomes illuminated off the spark of one flame. And so when I shine my light so bright that I ignite the light in others, I can ignite the entire circle. But if I'm too busy using my lighter and lighting everyone else's candle, then I run out of fluid at the end and my candles never gets used. So yeah, our only job is to shine our light so bright that we ignite the light in others. And the whole world's gonna become illuminated. Like that's it's so easy, but it's not. We make it complicated. Humans like to make things very complicated.
Yeah. So we often ask our guests, because we talk a lot about vibration on our show. on raising our vibration, which is kind of the same idea, like trying to shine our light brighter and brighter and brighter. We always like to ask our guests what kind of music they listen to either protect their vibration or raise it.
Oh my gosh, my music list is the most eclectic mess you will ever see in your life. So I love, like, for me, so I'm very much clairaudient, so music is how I get messages. I will just have a song pop into my head. I like to joke, if you've ever seen Transformers, the movie Transformers, how Bumblebee communicates through the radio because he doesn't have his own voice. That's what goes on in my head sometimes, just snippets of songs as messages. And I will, anything from Broadway musicals, my favorite being Kinky Boots. I cry every time because I find it so inspiring, this whole idea of loving people for who they are. I'm like, it's so beautiful. So that, like, Kinky Boots, all the way up to, I don't know names of artists, but there's a song called Devi Prayer, which is just so beautiful and gentle, or Native Prayer by Gary, some big long name I can never pronounce. So very gentle, soft music. I also like hardcore dubstep because sometimes you just need bass and noise. Right? Like anything where like the beat just drops is like boom and just noise. I'm like, oh, so happy. Um, and then I also sing, I'm part of a women's a cappella chorus. And so I sing in four-part harmony barbershop. So I'm part of a chorus and a barbershop quartet. And so I also listen to a lot of that kind of music. So my healing music, pretty much everything but opera is on my playlist. And opera, I can appreciate the talent that it requires to sing opera. As a singer, I appreciate it, but I hate listening to it 99% of the times. But everything else is, any kind of music can be healing for me. You know, 1940s, I love the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'm very much an old soul with my music. And then anything off Broadway is always my happy place.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so music, that's a tough one. If you look at my music list, you're like, wow, you got a lot of weird, like, it's every side of the spectrum. Every part of the spectrum.
Funny. What other question, Char?
Well, you know, I think we touched a little bit on it when we were talking about kind of anger work, but I'm curious. We talk a lot about shadow work. Leah and I do, anyways. And I'm curious how you view shadow work and what it is to you and how you work around it.
Absolutely. I consider myself a shadow worker, whereas most people who are healers identify as light workers. I'm a shadow worker. I walk the path of darkness so that others can walk with me and I can take them through it. So for me, shadow is anything that we hide from ourselves, which is basically your unconscious mind. So you've got the two parts of your mind, you've got your conscious mind, that's anything you're aware of. So right now you're probably aware of the sound of my voice. You might be aware of my wall behind me or something. And you might not be aware of, let's say, the sensation of your feet on the floor. Only now that I mentioned it, you're probably noticing your feet. So where was that information a moment ago? Your body's picking up the data, but it's out of your awareness. And so our unconscious mind does a lot of things, like it makes sure our heart is beating, it makes sure that we don't have to think about breath, and it also hides from us all the stuff about ourselves that we don't like, all of our traumas, anything that's too big for us to keep in our awareness. So if we're going through like a big thing in life and all the emotions are so overwhelming that if we held on to them, we would just completely break down. So we have this mechanism where our unconscious mind will basically say, hey, let me take this and hide it from you. And I will protect it for you so you don't have to think about it. But we need to come back to this, right? This is important. So we're going to put a pin in it. And so then the crisis is over and we never go back for the pins because we're like, well, I put it out of my mind. I just got over it. It's just not there anymore. I'm always like, that's amazing. Where did it go? And people are always like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, did magic fairies come to take it? No, then it's somewhere. And so for me, shadow work means dealing with all the stuff that we hid from ourselves, all those pins that we put in because we were too overwhelmed in the moment, but that are still there. And these pins are what cause the triggers. So we have, since these pins are important, we have a backup mechanism where if something happens in the present moment, that's sort of similar to all these things we stuck in our unconscious mind, our shadow. It will bring it up to the surface so we can heal it at once. So something small will happen in the moment, but we have this huge emotional reaction. And we call it a trigger, and that means the unconscious mind is functioning exactly as it should. So the problem isn't the trigger. The problem is all these pins that we put in that need to be cleared out. And so as a shadow worker, the tools I use are actually designed to pull the pins to clear that out. So for me, shadow work means going into the darkness, finding the pins, not pulling each individual pin, because that sucks and that's traumatic and no fun, but they're all connected almost like a string of pearls. If I have a string of pearls, I can either take each individual pearl off, or I can just yank the string and then there's nothing that connects them anymore. And so in my world, shadow work means finding the string and pulling it so that everything falls apart, so that you don't have to. We tend to think shadow work is about facing our demons head on and reliving the trauma over and over again. And it's certainly a valid method of shadow work, but it sucks, and most of us can't get through it because it's traumatic. So for me, shadow work is about finding a guide who's walked the path and who has tools to pull that string so that everything falls apart, so that we don't have all these pins and triggers everywhere. It's about healing the unconscious mind.
It makes a lot of sense. That definitely makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And it's a much easier way to do shadow work. The traditional way of shadow work is really painful and very long and really annoying. Or you can do it in a few months. So, yeah. Right, it's so much faster. Why not? Why fight our neurology when we can work with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to be respectful of your time. We've enjoyed talking to you so much.
Yes,
but
same. Thank you. This has been great.
Would you be able to share with our listeners some of the things that are coming up in the next year for you, some of your offerings, or where they might be able to find you?
Sure, absolutely. So everything is always posted on my website at www.livelifeunbroken.com. So I offer, we're on hiatus for the holidays, but January 7th is the first night back for my virtual healing circle. Like I said, these events are 100% free. Every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we gather on Zoom. We talk about different topics like shadow work, like boundaries, like sacred geometry. And then it's followed by guided meditation and some breath work and a gratitude practice. So I invite people, if they're wanting to connect with me, it's a really good way to meet me. The things that are recorded in Healing Circle then become part of my podcast. So people are welcome to check out my podcast, which is called Bridging the Spiritual Gap. And it is on iTunes and on Spotify. If someone wants to join me February 6th and 7th of the new year, I am running my Rewrite Your Story class live via Zoom. And this is the class that's all about the gestalts, all about emotions, all about depression and anxiety, all about anger, all about boundaries, as well as self-hypnosis. So how to start to get back in tune with your unconscious mind and bridge that gap between your head and your heart. And when I run it live, I have to rent space, so it ends up being pricey, but because I'm doing it online, it's $49, and it's Canadian dollars, so for you guys, it's probably going to be like a quarter, because our dollar sucks compared to yours. So it's nice and affordable going with the exchange rate. So that's an option. That's my most popular course to date. That is the one that people love the most. In May, I'm going to be running a practitioner training for anyone who wants to learn how to use the tools that I use, either for themselves or with others. I'm actually a trainer, so board designated trainer, and able to designate others in these tools. So that will be May 1st to 8th. And then I'm really hoping that my chakra retreats will be back online in May and in November of 2021. That's going to be dependent on what the world decides to do. Hopefully it starts to spin in the right direction again.
Those are in
Those are in person, yeah. The retreats are in person. They are in Ontario, so it would require some travel up here, but it is in the most magical location of all time. There's a stream that runs through the whole property, so no matter where you go, it's just there's the energy there is just incredible. Of all the places I've been, it's just fantastic. And we spend the whole weekend together. All the meals are included, the room. We talk about chakras. We do different activities. We do fire release. We do manifestation. We do all sorts of fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So that hopefully, what's that?
Want to go with me, Shara?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, come. Oh, it's going to be great. So far, it's scheduled for May 29th to 31st. So it is scheduled, and people are registering. And because once we go back into the real world and able to connect, it's going to fill up fast. So I'm telling people, if you know you want to come, even if we can't run it in May, I basically just keep moving the registrations forward until we're able to meet. And people have 2 years to use it. So let's say you register for May and May can't happen, and then for some reason you're not able to make the November one, it's fine. We just move your registration. So those are offering. What else am I offering? Those are the big things that I'm doing in the new year. Those are the big ones. So I will eventually also be running magnified healing, which is a energy healing modality similar to Reiki. But whereas Reiki is a channeled energy form, magnified healing works with the Kabbalistic tree of life to generate your own energy so you can heal others. It's a very beautiful, gentle healing, and I'm a trainer in that as well. So that will be, I don't know when that's going to be, but that I'm also hoping to run in 2021, but we require in person in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw something on your website that I was really excited about, something called Learn to be Heard. Is that still happening?
That one, so my Learn to Be Heard class, I haven't moved it into an online forum yet, but what that class was is I took the practitioner training and I pulled out all of the techniques and the board designation, and then I taught it. So all the stuff that I teach in my Learn to Be Heard class is included and then some in the practitioner training that I am running in May. And the benefit with that is because it's a board designation, it's also tax deductible when I run it that way. So the practitioner training is not replacing my Learn to Be Heard, but for now, that is how I'm getting people that information because it allows me to go deeper. The Learn to Be Heard, I have to keep cutting stuff out of it because there's only so much I can fit in a weekend. But with an 8-day practitioner training, I can give everyone all of it. So that's currently where it's at, and it's possible that once I can run it live on Zoom as well in the new year. That's in my head still. I'm waiting for my dead people to let me know when that's supposed to be run. They let me know.
Yeah. Well, great. We will definitely drop the links in below this so people will be able to find you. So did you have any further questions, Leah?
No, Jen, you're amazing. And I really, really genuinely appreciate you coming on and talking to us and all the work that you're doing. You're awesome. And I'm very grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much I'm so happy that the universe brought us together. And thank you so much for reaching out. And yeah, if you ever I can talk about this stuff all day, every day. So if you ever wanted to go deeper into any topics or chat again, I am always here. Always here.
Wonderful. That would be amazing. So to our listeners, if you liked our discussion today, please like and subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to bringing you more conversations to help expand the collective consciousness. And also, please be sure to go to Jen's podcast as well. We'll leave that link below.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.